Top 5 things that don't sit right with me. Number 5. All bamboo is not a type of tree. No, it's a type of grass. It just had to grow tall to compete for light in the forest, and I'm just not okay knowing that information. Number 4. Hawaiian people, indigenous to what is now America, because it wasn't already declared a state when it was colonized, they legally cannot be classified as indigenous to America, which is the most backwards reasoning I have ever heard. Number 3. I think Tom Brady got some kind of surgery. Because how are we moving bone structure this much? Anyone who knew this man before he came into the NFL like 96 years ago knows he did not look like this. Money buys all, except true love. Number 2. Rihanna, right? Wrong. Rihanna. Her name is pronounced Rihanna, and she said it multiple times.
It is Rihanna.
Thank you. No.
Yeah.
And I've only ever heard people say Rihanna.
I'm going face to face with Rihanna today.
Hey GQ, it's Rihanna.
So, now I don't know what to say, like, number 1. There's an American-born citizen in a Russian gulag for a vape. That doesn't even sound right. But the, penal colony are mostly just transformed gulags from 100 years ago, where people were tortured and commonly died from exhaustion, and also just chopped their own hands off from working so hard. Still today, they work 16 hours a day, and sadly, prisoner Brittany Griner is black, gay, American, and a woman. That's like 90% of the most hated things you can be in Russia. It all sounds really strange, but I can't help to feel really bad for Brittany. Top 10 cities with the most STDs. Number 10. Surprise, surprise, I actually used to live here. Fayetteville, North Carolina. Number 9. Knoxville, Tennessee. And Interbody Research, thanks for the list, but I'm sorry, that is not Knoxville or Tennessee. Number 8. Montgomery, Alabama. I don't know, I guess these things just like to transmit in hot and moist air or something. Number 7. New York City, who I'm just so surprised is not number 1. With all them people crammed into like 6 buildings and 3 alleys, I thought they'd just be everywhere, but number 6, Augusta, Georgia, bringing it back down south for the homies. Number 5, you literally cannot spell Washington DC without STD. So, number 4, San Francisco. Man, this city is a seriously beautiful place to be. Number 3, Philadelphia, which seems like a lie. Not them having STDs or anything, I just find it hard to believe people actually live there. Number 2, Baltimore, which I still receive hate mail to this day, because I've been calling it the worst city in the US, but this really isn't helping change my opinion. And number 1, Jackson, Mississippi. But, like, what even is that? In all honesty, an STD really isn't that bad compared to just living there, so. Top 3 weirdest animals. Number 3, these ribbon worms. Or should I say, this ribbon worm, since it's just one animal. Sadly, it usually sits on the ocean floor, which keeps it from exploding into a million pieces. Also, he can't really breathe, and stress literally makes him fall apart. So if you see one of these guys on the shore, just, kick him back in the ocean. Number 2, and I mean, he's not that weird. He's kinda ugly, sure, but the main thing is he's a born killer. Their dads are good for nothings, and their moms abandon them in other birds' nest, where once they're born, they abort the other eggs and mooch off the mom, who apparently loves their child no matter what, even when they're twice her size at 1 month old, greedy, and she's like 99% sure it's not her kid. So yeah, talk about family drama. And number 1, the otter shrew, which isn't actually an otter or a shrew. Chances are you've never even seen one of these things, because they've been endangered since before I was born, and they're headed down the path of extinction. They live mostly on the top of a couple of mountains in Africa, mountains that are victim to heavy mining and expanding rice fields. Also, out of all the ones held in captivity, the longest living one could only stay alive for 14 days, and in bad shape too. Your phone is going to be forcibly shut off, and you're going to lose the ability to communicate. Yeah, so I hear you saying, well, so is every other person in the world, as well as their computers, fridge, all transportation, and every source of light that humans have ever created involving electricity. And that's right, even Meemaw's pacemaker. What I'm getting at is a coronal mass ejection. A large explosion of plasma and magnetic fields from the sun's atmosphere. Okay, so what? We just had a solar flare not too long ago and it was hardly a mere fart.
ごめんなさい、すみません。
Did you not just hear me say coronal mass ejection in that dramatic voice? They're obviously different. A solar flare is a congratulatory spank on the posterior. In a CME, it's any hit on the Here Comes the Boom video. Oh my god. Also, more bad news, past events suggest we're overdue for one. So, considering it does stick to pattern, you could expect to tune in later. The last one was back in 1859 and lasted 2 days. People saw Aurora Borealis all over the world. There were mass blackouts, damaged power grids everywhere, and the most advanced tech, telegraphs, shot off sparks and set stations on fire. And even after they turned off all the electricity, they were still operable because of the enormous amount of energy being blasted at them. Luckily, they didn't have a lot of electronics, phones in their pockets and TVs in their homes and planes in the sky. Ooh, I hate to jinx it, but man, whoever's flying that day is gonna have a bad last day. So, yeah, goodbye. The Kipu. No, this isn't a mop, and are essentially Native American record keepers, some variants possibly up to 5,000 years old. Their uses included collecting census data for people in inventory, tax obligations, military enlistments, and even calendars. These codes used base 10 like today. The Kipukumayaks, or accountants, were always accurate, and even assisted Spanish for goods and production payments. Even so, some knots aren't even numbers, and are just telling a story with 95 combination of knots, the colors amounting to a logosyllabic writing system, and could actually be used for undetected communication from the Spanish authorities when they came to take over. Though the language is still undeciphered, aside from the names of 2 family lineages who have been sending and receiving these messages, after many hundreds of these have been analyzed, the numbers are assured. I'm obviously not about to reteach you math, but each cluster has a sort of number placement, so ones, tens, hundreds, and so on. Each knot type has a certain value. The absence of a knot is 0. A figure 8 knot with an extra loop is a 0 at the end. These figure 8s only come at the end of a knot. Long knots are 2 to 9, depending on the loops, and the simple knot is a 10. Because a figure 8 with an extra loop equals a 0 at the end, a 10 will never be used at the end, so any other knot preceded by a simple knot is the start of a new number sequence. Colors, rope type, spaces, and directions can all mean different things. These could easily be read by a blind person like Braille, and have a rich history we may just never know because of colonization and genocide. Many systems like this existed in pre-genocidal Native American spheres, but were almost always categorized as cult or idol. Though over the past 100 years, as natives weren't categorized as savages, animals, or pseudo-human, other people have begun to find out more complexities like, your phone is going to be forcibly shut off, and you're going to lose the ability to communicate. Yeah, so, I hear you saying, well, so is every other person in the world, as well as their computers, fridge, all transportation, and every source of light that humans have ever created involving electricity. And that's right, even Meemaw's pacemaker. What I'm getting at is a coronal mass ejection. A large explosion of plasma and magnetic fields from the sun's atmosphere. Okay, so what? We just had a solar flare not too long ago and it was hardly a mere fart.
ごめんなさいすみません。
Did you not just hear me say coronal mass ejection in that dramatic voice? They're obviously different. A solar flare is a congratulatory spank on the posterior. In a CME, it's any hit on the Here Comes the Boom video. Oh my god. Also, more bad news, past events suggest we're overdue for one. So, considering it does stick to pattern, you could expect to tune in later. The last one was back in 1859 and lasted 2 days. People saw aurora borealis all over the world. There were mass blackouts, damaged power grids everywhere, and the most advanced tech, telegraphs, shot off sparks and set stations on fire. And even after they turned off all the electricity, they were still operable because of the enormous amount of energy being blasted at them. Luckily, they didn't have a lot of electronics, phones in their pockets and TVs in their homes and planes in the sky. Ooh. I hate to jinx it, but man, whoever's flying that day is gonna have a bad last day. So, yeah, goodbye. I was enjoying my afterlife in paradise when an angel told me I have to go back to my body as the doctor successfully revived me. I cried in despair, knowing that I'd have to live in a vegetative state again. The neighbors in my apartment complex have a Halloween decoration on their door that screams when it senses motion. I don't know what's worse, that it screams when seemingly no one is around, or that it doesn't scream when I walk by. As the sirens went off, my son's face lit up with a smile yelling, "Daddy, fire truck." I saw the dozens of missiles fly above us. I got down and forced my smile through my tears and replied, "Yes, son, the fire truck is coming." As it turns out, the atheists were right. There's nothing after you die. And yet, it doesn't stop. I was born blind, but lucky enough to have a loving mother who took care of my every need. Imagine the betrayal I felt when a stitch slipped and a ray of light hid my eyes for the first time. Whenever I consider killing myself to escape my parents' abuse, I just recite my mantra, "You don't deserve to die." Ironically, now that they're old, hungry, covered in bed sores, and begging to be put out of their misery, I still have the same mantra. I was so devastated when I came home and I found my wife in bed with another man that I left without saying a word. It wasn't until the day after, when I finally returned, that I noticed the lock on the back door was broken. Time out. Commercial break. Only 7% of you guys are subscribed. Help me change that. 92.4 of you guys subscribe right now while you're watching the video. That way you never miss one of these. Which one of these people do you think a dog would like the most? It's this one. Unlike Matt Gaetz, dogs most prefer mature women out of any random humans. No, not because men are stinky, that's actually a plus in their minds, but because adult women usually exhibit a mix of behavior dogs tend to prefer, and they have good taste. Think about how you approach a dog to make them happy or comfortable when meeting them, getting down on their level, talking in a higher pitched voice than normal, and a lot more calm and less threatening than your average spider monkey of a 10-year-old cousin trying to ride them within the first 28 seconds of meeting them. Not to mention, a majority of the times, women tend to have less facial hair, while us humans, being mostly hairless and pretty gross looking to dogs, they've adapted to their naked best friends, and the more facial hair you have, the less effective their adaptation to read facial expression actually works. But despite all of the things that make men less appealing to them initially, they can still love them all the same. Keep treating them the way they like, and you too can be almost as lovable as a mature woman. Top 5 Queen Elizabeth II facts. Number 5. Though it seems pretty obvious, since there's no queen, Prince Charles is now King Charles III, and is also the oldest living person to ever assume British throne. Charles I and II assumed in 1625 and 1649, so it's been a while since the last Charles. Number 4. At the time of death, she was actually older than 99.6% of all the people on the planet, leaving a measly 0.04% to have been born before her and still living. Number 3. Queen Elizabeth II is the longest reigning monarch in British history, and actually, the second longest reigning monarch to ever exist, at 70 years, only coming behind the French king, Louis XIV, whose reign lasted 72 years, after he took the throne at the age of 4 in 1715. Number 2. In 1926, when she was born, the life expectancy in the UK was only 58 years old, and despite that expectancy, Number 1. The list of people she was older than included Anne Frank, Martin Luther King, Clint Eastwood, Marilyn Monroe, and the list of people that were alive at the same time as her: Thomas Edison, Nikola Tesla, Claude Monet, Amelia Earhart, and Delina Filkins, a woman born in Stark, New York in 1815, who also happened to be the oldest person in the world, and at the time this photo was taken, it would only be a year before the Queen herself was born. If I told you to imagine a pre-Columbian Native American dwelling, what would you be picturing? Probably this? Yes, marketable indeed, but you don't truly believe that millions of people across vast cultures on Innis lands were all living in one sort of structure, right? Right? Well, teepees were Plains natives go to in this area, made by buffalo hide, because the Plains natives tended to do a whole lot of walking, and moving teepees just made sense since they break down in like 20 minutes. The most common Native American dwelling would have been a wigwam. You usually see this attributed to the Algonquin people, which is a large grouping of people, but still not large enough. Yes, they were made here, but they were also made here, and here. A version of this structure could be seen in almost every Native American tribe, even if it wasn't used for dwellings. Moving on, longhouses, while similar to wigwams, are obviously bigger and used to house families. Like, families, not families. Now, a plank house is similar to a longhouse, but instead are pretty permanent living structures. And to give you an example of these houses' uses, both my tribes used all three of these houses we've listed, and so was the fourth type. This right here is a roundhouse, and this right here is my great-great-great-grandpa. This special type of house was used for very important tribal or spiritual leaders. During the daytime, it's more like the village's house, used for dances, spiritual gatherings, and sometimes just hanging out. And during the nighttime, it turns into someone's personal dwelling, but it's pretty uncommon out of its region. So for another extremely common type of house, a pit house, which is a grouping of houses that are partially dug into the ground. Next, adobe homes. They were used in this region because of resource availability. I'm sure we all know about igloos and how they were lived in by the Inuit people and First Nations peoples. As you can see, different homes were used for different ways of life. Because imagine a Puebloan deciding he wanted an igloo, or a Gitchwin wanting an adobe home. I can tell you one thing, Eagle definitely can deliver in that message, because different available material, living conditions, and uses resulted in a massive variety of homes. So before you think of teepees, consider where, who, and obviously practicality. Zombie animals. Humans, since the beginning of storytelling, have been fascinated with the idea of humans walking around half alive. The animal kingdom has already seen cases like this. Snail zombies. While they can lead a normal life, some snails have the misfortune of being infected by the leucochloridium worms, which take over its body and leads the snail to a high place, pulsate like a juicy caterpillar, only to be eaten by a bird, as the bird's stomachs are the reproducing grounds. A more well-known zombie creator is the cordyceps, infecting ants' brains to climb up to a high place. Once it's stable, it sprouts out the ant's head and releases spores only to infect more ants. Unfortunately, there are two close instances in humans as well, both lethal. The first is prion disease, which you catch while eating another human's brain. It causes personality change, uncontrollable movements, and kills within 6 months. The other is rabies, the most lethal viral disease with a 99.9% mortality rate. If you get it, you will die, but not before suffering symptoms of aggressiveness, excessive movement, confusion, hallucinations, bizarre thoughts, foaming at the mouth, being unable to drink water, and the irresistible urge to attack other humans. Something like this being widespread would be the closest thing to a zombie outbreak, and the end of humanity as we know it. Don't forget to tune in next time. We wouldn't want you to miss out on any mysterious content. Now would we? Understanding disabilities. Number 3. This demonstration allows you to see the difficulties of what someone diagnosed with dyslexia has to face. It's pretty challenging to even read the first sentence, and they seriously deserve some more respect. Number 2. What you're seeing is a cluster headache attack, one of the most painful illnesses known to man, and many who have them choose death, as being alive is worse than any torture method. It's said to be comparable to 2 red-hot knives in your eyes. Number 1. Schizophrenia. If impaired judgment and behavior weren't enough, people suffering from schizophrenia have delusions and hallucinations, including auditory, tactile, and visual. Schizo-induced psychosis is pretty much a living nightmare, seeing faces and other things that generally don't exist in actual reality. The good thing is, as science advances every day, we come closer and closer to the best symptom-reducing methods.